Hello, and welcome to We Live for Saturday, your favorite college football podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike, and with me, as always, is your other co-host, John. John, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. It's been a good week. Feeling a little hoarse. I got a little sick yesterday, so sorry about that. Otherwise, we would have had this out last night. But life happens, things like that. But other than that, man, things are good. No major complaints. The weather's been pretty agreeable. Not too hot, in my opinion.
Yeah, awesome. Glad to hear you're doing better. It's been hot-ish. It's been hot, probably hotter than I need it to be at this point in the year. Now that we're closing in towards the end of August,
Mm-hmm.
but not like crazy. It hasn't been like 90s. It's been like 80s.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
it's
not
been
too
pretty
bad. I'm
solid.
glad to hear you're feeling better. I
Yeah,
know that sounded rough yesterday when you texted me and were like, "This is going to be a no-go today."
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't came on suddenly and wasn't a lot of fun. So, and I don't need to get into any details, but
Sure.
that's it. But I'm glad to be here now and feeling much, much, much better. So yeah.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it.
Awesome. And before we go any further, please like and subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube. And if you are on an audio platform, please leave a review for
Mhm.
us. We really appreciate that. That helps us grow the podcast and move it forward. So yeah, if you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe.
Yeah, leave comments. Again, as always, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, and on Twitter at We Live for B1GSAT.
Yep. And right here on YouTube as well.
That's right.
Awesome. All right, John, should we get right into it?
Yeah, let's do it. We got a lot of things to discuss tonight.
We do. So first of all, we're talking about a proposal in the group of five. And this comes from Ross Dellinger. Wow. We reference Ross Dellinger's work a lot on this podcast. He
Yeah,
is really kind of got it. He's got his finger on the pulse a little bit.
Yeah.
It's
He
funny
does.
because his own podcast isn't very good, but it's not his fault. It's the guys he's on it
True.
with. And we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. But it's true. It's true. Ross is fantastic. He's
Ross is
amazing at what
great.
he does.
He does really good. He does
Mhm.
really good journalism. And the group of five is getting together this next week in Dallas to discuss some pressing issues, including a reshaped group of five postseason incorporating the bowls. And as one athletic director suggested, an NIT of football, potentially. So before we get into that, the anxiety the group of five is having
Mhm.
is that they are worried they're going to lose their automatic qualifying slot in the playoff. So they
Yes.
have that for the next 2 years, as we'll have the same playoff structure that we have this year, next year.
Mhm.
But then after that, they're going back to the table and it could change. So the group of five is really worried they're going to lose their automatic qualifying spot. And they're saying, if that happens, what are they doing? And what do they do to make up for that? And if that doesn't, even if it doesn't happen, I think they're still trying to figure out ways, to maximize revenue and do all the things that football programs have to do in this day and age.
Yeah.
And the idea of a group of five NIT, John, what do you think of that as a prospect?
I think it's silly. I think, I've seen things discussed about whether just having an NIT, kind of just like college basketball, with everyone involved.
Yes,
And
the NIT is for those who don't know, the NIT is the tournament in college basketball, the postseason tournament for the teams that don't make the NCAA tournament. And
yeah.
the NCAA tournament is what crowns the national champion. So
Mhm.
the NIT is more or less for not much.
It's not for much, and it's with college basketball, like it's more. I get it a little bit more. But for college football, man, like it's just not the same sport. And why do we have to keep
Yeah.
trying to make it into something that it's not? And I don't think it's good. I think there would be, people are already upset about opt outs. There would be massive amounts of opt outs. The same teams wouldn't even be playing essentially.
No,
In
that's the thing about if you have an NIT, and especially if you open it up to, major conference players, but even if you keep it just group of 5 team.
Mm.
In that situation, the best players, if they're like, oh, you have to play for a month straight and you don't have a shot to win a national title, they're gonna opt out.
Yep.
They're not gonna play. And so you're gonna see teams that already aren't the best teams in the sport further, and then you're gonna see all of their best players not playing
Mm-hmm.
because they don't want to take the risk of getting injured playing another month of football for something that's not even, that's something that's a minor reward at best.
Mm-hmm.
So the bowl season works as it does, and as wonky and unwieldy as it is, the bowl season works because it's only adding one game
Mm-hmm.
to the regular season.
Yeah.
And you get to see all these teams one more time, and they get a few weeks or a month to prepare. They all bring their best shot. They can bring their best shot. If they do have opt-outs, they have enough to, or if they do have opt-outs, which does happen,
Mm-hmm.
teams have the time to practice to like get the next guy up ready, and usually have them, maybe they're not going to perform at the same level, but often they can perform at a decent level. These are still college football players. Whereas if you're in a group of 5 situation and the whole offensive line is like, why are we going to risk getting hurt for next year?
Yeah.
Or your best players who might have a chance to get drafted or get picked up as, undrafted free agent in the NFL, they're just not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to end up with a really watered down, terrible television product. And right now, you already have with the bowl system, a system that everybody loves,
Mm-hmm.
everybody watches. The games are on largely when people are on vacation, and it works great. So I don't know why they're in a hurry to reshuffle and change the bowl.
Well, and my whole thing at this point in time is like, we've had enough change, man. Like, why just leave it alone? Like, it works.
Seriously.
We don't need any more of this. Nobody's really asking for this except for
No.
maybe the TV executives just to make more money, but none of the fans want this that I know of, at least not seriously, or any serious fans do. And it's just, there has been such an upheaval within college football in the last like 3, 5, years, and we're just tired, man. I think there has become a lot of apathy amongst the college football fan bases because of this constant change. People are tired of having to keep up with everything. And so give us a freaking break. Stop. Like, let it sit, let it rest. Like, you do not have to do every single idea that crosses your mind. You just don't have to. Like, sometimes if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just leave it be. And this works.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think you make a really strong point. And we already have had all of the chaos of realignment and now the 12-team playoff on top of realignment. And we are tired of all the changes.
Yeah. Well, and they're already guaranteeing more realignment and more playoffs, reconfiguring the playoff system. So like, you don't just throw in something else on top of it, like an NIT. It's just, it's
No.
stupid. It's silly. It's a money grab, and it's a money grab.
And it won't work. It's a money grab that won't work.
I think it'll fail miserably. So why? But I don't know.
It's like, if you want, we already have our minor college football playoff. It's the FCS playoffs.
Yeah.
And those are fun.
Yep.
And D2 and D3, and you get those, you get a little bit of that on TV now more than you used to.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuff's all fun.
Absolutely.
But nobody wants to see group of 5 teams line up for a month straight and try to determine a champion from a bunch of rosters that will be featuring crazy attrition. And it just won't be very good football. It just won't.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not for it at all. I think we need to just let certain things just be as is. And I think you and I were discussing this prior, and I don't think there has been this much upheaval in this sport in like 100 years. So
the last time, more than 100 years, the last time there was this much upheaval in college football was probably when Teddy Roosevelt stepped in to change the rules because players were dying on the field, and they were going to get rid of football altogether if that didn't stop.
Yep.
And Teddy Roosevelt stepped in, and they changed a ton of rules. And honestly, even those changes probably weren't as all encompassing and as what we're seeing now. I mean,
Yeah.
they're like, it's like, it's on that level.
Yep. Absolutely. So I just give us a break, please.
Yes.
Please.
Stop.
Yeah. Let's
And
just
also, oh, go on.
No, I was just gonna say, let's just. I want to be able to just enjoy the sport for a while. Like, give me 5 years, 10 years. 10 years would be great. Well, that's but
I would take just this year. Can we just stop for this year? For this one singular year, and maybe
yeah,
we can just enjoy some ball and not deal with any of this off the field nonsense
yes,
for like one full beautiful season. Because I just hate that the actual ball gets lost when people get focused on all this other stuff, and it just bleeds across. And I hate the way the media is forced to cover it, and it's gross. I hate it.
yeah, well, and dude, it's taking precedence over the actual game. So that's it's just like I said. I think everyone's just getting tired of it, and it's causing. I think it's losing fans. To be honest with you.
Yes. Yeah. You can't keep changing things. It'd be like if they changed the rules of the game every year, like they did back in the game. They change those rules once, and then they gradually shift the rules over time.
Yep.
It'd be like if you showed up and football was a totally different sport suddenly, and then they expect you to still be interested. That's what they're doing to everything that's not on the field product. That's what they're doing to everything else that we're attached to, and it is really frustrating. And I do want everything to just be the same for a while. And I also want us to try out the 12-team playoff, see how it works before they decide they're going to 14.
Exactly.
Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's nuts, and it's just greed. It's just greed, and that's
I know.
what it is.
And they're not going to stop until every 9-3 SEC team is in the playoff. That's going to be the end result of all of this stuff.
That's why they're doing it.
Every 9-3 SEC team.
That's why they're doing it. They want the entire SEC in the college football playoff. That's it.
So for what it's worth, I think the group of 5 should keep their qualifying spot.
Yes,
they should. It's one spot out of 12. They should be allowed to have it. It's like half the teams in the FBS are group of 5 teams. Like, give them one spot in the playoff, no matter how badly it goes.
I'm with it. I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah. All right, John. Well, I should have announced this earlier. This is a preview episode. This is episode 5 of 6 of our Big Ten football team previews. And we have to get them done quickly because the season is a week from Thursday. That is a week and a half. Crazy. And I'm not counting week 0, okay? Week 0 is fine. And it is college football. I'm not going to say it's not college football, but I don't count week 0. The Big Ten's not playing in week 0. It's not something that means a whole lot to me unless Georgia Tech beats Florida State, in which case I'm going to laugh. And that'll be hilarious. But I'm probably not even going to watch. I'm focused on the upcoming Big Ten season, and we get that kicked off in a week and a half. I don't even know where the offseason went.
This is one of the fastest off seasons I can remember.
Right?
I've had a lot going on in my life, obviously,
Yes.
so it makes sense that I've been really busy. But like, even still, it seems like I'm used to it crawling along in some degree. But like, this has gone by quick, and I don't know.
Usually I'm jonesing for football by the time it comes back, but like at this year, I'm like, oh, we have football already. That's crazy. Yeah. Like, I'm almost like kind of not ready for it yet. Like, I will be when it happens, and I'm there on opening night. Yeah. And 53,000 of my best friends are screaming simultaneously. Like, then I'll be up. I'll be up for it. I'll be ready.
For sure.
But yeah, until then, man, until opening day, I feel kind of not ready.
Like, I think like a lot of things happen this off season, like not just, we're obviously preparing. There's all the excitement of new teams actually joining the conferences.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more speculation, a lot more talk, a lot more things to pay attention to. So to take up our time, which has been great. That's cool. That's great. That's fun. And then obviously the college football video game. I mean, like that was a huge, huge thing for many of us. And I think that also like led to, just a lot more ability to have things to talk about and continue and pass the time away, where usually June, July, there's nothing. There is nothing other than to troll your rival fan base and just, get into fights on Twitter. That's generally what happens through June
Yeah.
and July. So,
Yep.
And they mean nothing. But now,
because no one knows anything about what's actually going to happen. Nobody knows a thing. Everyone is just pissing in the wind.
That's it. Yeah, but yeah, man, it's exciting. This is coming up. I too am like, I don't feel ready for it right now. But I'm feeling it. I'm starting to feel like there's like some fall creeping in.
Yep.
I'm seeing some random leaves here changing a bit, and I don't know. It's not. It's just I have an ash tree.
Okay.
Some of the leaves are turning a little yellow here and there. Now it could be that we've just had way too much rain and that's affecting the trees. But I'm looking at it as if it's fall,
as an almost fall thing.
Yes,
sure.
Yeah. So that's my point of view. That's my perspective. So
yeah. And we're used to that because where we come from originally, both John and I, fall comes early.
It does. That's true.
Fall comes a little later in the Twin Cities than it does in Fargo-Moorhead.
Yeah, that's wild. I forget about that sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. No, they get that. They get that real quick.
Oh yeah. Many Halloweens in winter coats and snow pants.
Yeah, it happens. It does.
Yeah. Sorry. Let's move on. Yeah, I'm wasting enough time.
All right, let's get into it. So today we are doing Penn State, Maryland, and UCLA. So excellent. I'm excited to get into all three of those teams. I think that they all have fascinating storylines that we need to talk about. And yeah, anything else, John, you want to say? Please like and subscribe again if you didn't before. Anything else you want to say before we get into it?
No, I think as always, just look us up here at We Live for Saturday, on Twitter at We Live for B1GSat. You can find Mike at Alibaba26, me at Norwegian Gopher, and just shoot us any questions, thoughts, ideas, arguments, anything. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, abuse. If you wanna yell at us, tell us what we're wrong about. I love that. I love when we get comments and people tell us what we're wrong about.
Yeah, honestly, it's great. And some of it's very helpful. We've gotten some really good constructive criticism that's been awesome and very helpful. And we'll take it. And if there's stuff we don't know or we get wrong, happy to correct ourselves. Absolutely. Not a problem.
And another one was the Oregon guy who told me that the Oregon's money is not the reason they're getting all the recruits, to which I say,
okay.
It's 2024. The best players aren't playing for free.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So I believe that Dan Lanning's, I believe he's a great coach. I believe he's a great recruiter. I believe he has a family atmosphere in Eugene.
Yep.
That said, those recruits are not hauling from the South to the Pacific Northwest if they're not getting paid. It's not happening.
No.
Yeah.
But Oregon's a great program.
Oregon is a great program. Yep. Super excited to cover them this year. They are going to be not just a Big Ten title contender, but a national title contender.
Absolutely.
So, Oregon Ducks fans, we give you all the respect in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And from Oregon, let's go to one of the teams we're previewing today. And let's start with another national title contender, I'd say, Penn State.
Yeah, for real.
The Penn State Nittany Lions. So first off, it's important to note that our Penn State contributors are at Will Gamble 15 and at the Yinzer Lion, and that's Mark. So Will Gamble and Mark, really appreciate you guys so much. They gave us a lot of good information. As usual with these previews, I will probably give both of their answers for the first question or two, and then I will kind of mix them together and just, use them as they go.
And highly recommend everyone follow them. They know their stuff. They're good people, wonderful to interact with.
Yep. And they do a lot of, and they put out a lot of content too.
Yes, they do.
So a lot of anything you want to know that's new with Penn State, college football, how it relates to Penn State, they're the guys you want to hit up for sure.
For sure.
All right. First off, first question. Now that you've seen how your team did in the portal, how spring went, what is your expectation for this season, and what is your projected record for 2024? Mark said, my expectation for Penn State football is quite high in 2024. With the amount of talent, the construction of the roster, and schedule favorability, this should be a playoff team without a doubt. Says my record prediction is 11-1, but I won't commit to who the loss will be. That's fair, too. There's also the chance for the typical 10-2 season, but it needs to change at some point. The time is now. Like that. And Will says, my expectations for the season are twofold. Defense will remain a top 5 defense in the nation, and the offense will take a step forward with Kotelnicki as OC. The question is, how much? And I think that's totally reasonable.
Yep.
Question 2. Rank the following position groups and how strong you think they are comparatively. So Mark went RBs, D-line, secondary, linebackers, tight ends, QBs, special teams, O-line, wide receivers. And Will went tight end, running back, D-line, QB, O-line, secondary, wide receiver, special teams. So you get an idea of what they think. It looks like really good running backs, really good defense. Unsure about the wide receiver crew, I think, is the biggest thing that comes out there. And we'll talk about that as we go on. Best player at each position group. Running back, Nick Singleton. Defensive line, Abdul Carter on the edge. Secondary, KJ Winston. Linebackers, Kobe King. Tight end, Tyler Warren. QB, Drew Aller. Special teams, Riley Thompson, the punter. Offensive line, Drew Shelton at left tackle. And wide receivers, Julian Fleming, the Ohio State transfer. And it looks like those lists were about the same for both, although there are also listed Tony Rojas on the offensive line and Kevin Winston in the secondary. Which players are going to play this fall who are unproven or proven to be questionable? Biggest question mark in terms for players for Mark is Drew Aller making a jump, and wide receiver Harrison Wallace III playing a full healthy season. Thinks if Aller makes the jump, this will be one of the best teams in the country. If Wallace stays healthy and lives up to his potential, the wide receiver room will be much better off than anticipated. And Will thought the liability that comes to mind is Tyler Elsdon. Every time he's been on the field, says it seems like he gives up a big play. So that'll be something to watch as well. How did the transfer portal go? Which transfer portal players will make the biggest impact this season? Transfer portal was pretty meh for Penn State. Brought in veteran wide receiver Julian Fleming from Ohio State, Nolan Rucci, the tackle from Wisconsin, cornerback AJ Harris from Georgia, notably. Fleming and Harris will have the biggest impact as they fill immediate needs at their respective positions. Yeah, so those are guys that are going to contribute a lot. It'll be really interesting. We'll talk about it later, John, but I am fascinated by the Julian Fleming thing.
Yeah, same.
He is one of my top Big Ten players to watch this fall.
Yep.
Because I think how things turn out for him are going to really define how things go for Penn State, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Which members of the coaching staff are in prove-it mode this year? Will these coaches be fired if things don't go well for their position groups? They listed Phil Troutwine at OL and Marcus Hogans at wide receiver. These two groups have been Penn State's biggest weaknesses in recent years. Doesn't think either is in danger of being fired, but really thinks that they need to step up and make a difference. And yeah, Marcus Hogans was listed by both. So I'd say he's Marquez Hogans. And he needs to step forward for this Nittany Lion team this year. How do you feel about your head coach heading into 2024? Mark feels good about James Franklin, everything he's done for Penn State. Gets a lot of hate nationally due to his less than desirable record versus Michigan and Ohio State, but has the program at 10 wins and a New York Six Bowl most years. With the playoff field expanding to 12 in 2024, expects to have the team in that discussion annually. It's a massive letdown if they miss the playoffs this season. And Will makes the point that Franklin's a coach that everyone loves to hate. With the resources Penn State has, he does a great job recruiting. Culture's amazing. Franklin consistently gets double-digit wins. The only lackluster area, and we've talked about this, John, a lot, is for him is on game day. He does not make the best in-game decisions. He just doesn't. But overall, feels really good about Franklin. Yeah. I think that's fair, too. And we'll talk about that more when we get into our own thoughts about this.
Yeah.
Besides QB in your position, opinion, excuse me, what position on your team can least afford injuries? Position that can least afford injuries is corner, also lists linebacker and D end. So we'll have to see if those position groups are able to stay healthy. How well is your team set up for the short and long term in the new big conference? Penn State set up well in the short term in the new Big Ten, has the third best odds to win the conference this season, top 10 odds to win a national championship. It's an experienced unit. The future's a little murky with a lot of unknowns with NIL and recruiting, but Penn State already has a top 10 recruiting class for 2026, and they don't look to cool off anytime soon. Expects them to contend for conference titles annually, even in the new look conference. And they agree. But Will says long-term is worried, as he says we're woefully behind in NIL. So that's interesting. That surprises me a little bit. I think of Penn State as a school that has pretty good NIL.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting comment. And then what will constitute a successful season this year? And they're not beating around the bush. They're saying making the playoffs, winning at least one game. And I think that's fair. James Franklin has really struggled in big games. So seeing them make a playoff and win a game in the playoff would be a big step forward, I think, for the Nittany Lions. Oh man, John, can you imagine if Penn State got to host a playoff game this year in Happy Valley?
Oh, that'd be incredible.
I would love to see that.
Heck yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, way more fun than going to Tennessee or something.
I want to see, dude, they have to. They can't be planning. I mean, we talked about it in a previous episode about how the committee is probably already planning against us. But
give us a cold weather playoff games, you cowards. Give us cold weather playoff games. That's what the people want.
That's right.
They want to see it. So,
real football weather, man. Real football weather.
Real football players playing real football in real football weather.
That's right.
Awesome. All right, John, thoughts on Penn State?
I have a feeling this team is going to take a major step forward. I really do. I think that they have a lot of good pieces coming back, amazing pieces coming back, frankly. And I know that Franklin gets a lot of hate. I think, for similar reasons that I think, PJ Fleck does too, for his attitude or how he is with the press or what have you. But the guy's a good coach. Yes, he fumbles the ball in big games, and he needs to change that. But I have a feeling that there's definitely some pressure on him this year after what happened last year, and especially after the embarrassing bowl game. That was just an awful showing. There was no excuse for that, and we talked about that.
They didn't show up. They flat out didn't show up for the bowl game, and it was embarrassing.
It was pathetic. Yeah, and that to me is inexcusable, and he absolutely deserved the heat for that. And
he did not have those guys ready to play.
No. Now, do I think he's on any kind of hot seat right now? No, but I do think that there could be just a little warmth as you better get something going. And now that we have a 12-team playoff, which we will, almost assuredly be in, I assume anyways, that you got to show something when you get there. You can't just not show up. We got to win those games. You got to at least be competitive. And I think he's going to do that. And I think they have some great tools. I think that Drew Alar is going to be even better. I think he's now going to settle in. I'm assuming him to have some more weapons now to throw to, because he wasn't bad last year. He just looked bad because he didn't have any receivers that were able to come down with the ball. And
the wide receivers flat out underperformed last season.
Yep.
They couldn't get separation. And when the ball came to them, they struggled to make plays downfield.
Exactly.
That allowed defenses to focus in on Nick Singleton and Katron Allen in the run game.
Yep.
And and Penn State lost 4 guys to the transfer portal, including leading receiver Keandre Lambert-Smith. And then they bring in Julian Fleming from Ohio State. And that's really fascinating to me, John, because Julian Fleming, we know, is a good football player, but Julian Fleming was never asked to be the number 1 or number 2 option at Ohio State.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can he be an effective player when the other team is scheming to take him away? Because he will be the first guy that other opposing teams are trying to take away this year.
I think he can. I think he can be effective. I think even now that he's being put in that position, that you are the number one guy, that he's going to raise his game. I think I saw it last year when he was on the field. The talent is there, man. I mean, the guy's got all
Yeah.
the
Oh yeah.
intangibles. And so like it's not going to be a problem. And who knows? I think that's when some people perform best. And so having him on the field, I think, is really going to improve things a lot and take some of that pressure and allow Katron Allen and Nick Singleton to actually be able to like open up the run game a little bit. And I think
Yes.
that offensive line is going to be solid. Defensively, I mean, I think Penn State's going to be outstanding. Like, and
Yeah.
I'm really not concerned about their defense at all, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, new defensive coordinator Tom Allen. Yeah, he failed
Yes.
as the head coach at Indiana, but he has had a lot of success coaching defenses over his entire career. And he's a defensive guru. He, runs his 4-2-5 version of the 4-2-5. He said he wants to focus on takeaways, tackling, and effort.
Mm-hmm.
Like all defensive coaches, he wants his guys to play fast and free and confident. He's got 6 starters back from last year's dominant defensive unit. Despite returning 9 of their top 12 defensive linemen, they still decided to move superstar linebacker Abdul Carter from linebacker to DN this spring. Man, if you are that good on the D line and you still move a guy who's an All-American linebacker and say, no, you're going to play DN now. That's a ballsy move.
Mm-hmm.
And also it shows maybe that Abdul Carter is just not really human. And is he going to pick up right where Chop Robinson left off is what I'm saying.
I just think that pass rush is going to be terrifying.
Oh, right.
I would be so scared. That's not going to be fun for anybody.
Yeah,
Also.
no, they've got him and Dennis Sutton at the other D end. And then they got guys like Zariah Fisher, Amin Vanover. And then back at tackle, you've got Zane Durant and Devin Ellis are back there, along with backups Akeem Beeman and Koziah Izzard, which is a great name for a defensive tackle. Koziah. He's Isaiah, or he's, like Isaiah, but he's cozy. Yeah. He's Koziah. It's just chilling in the middle. I love that name for a defensive tackle specifically.
It's going to be great.
Yeah. And then they return safeties, Kevin Winston, Jalen Reed. They do replace their top 3 cornerbacks. But they've got, Cam Miller, the Georgia transfer, and AJ Harris to start at cornerback, along with Zakee Wheatley as the nickel. John, Drew Aller. He's such an enigma because he was very good last year, 25 touchdowns and 2 picks, but in 5 of their games, including all their losses, he completed fewer than 50% of his passes. And that's rough.
Yeah.
That's rough. You can't have that. But again, his receivers weren't doing him any favors. So I think, honestly, more than Drew Aller needing to take a step forward, and he does. He needs to take a step forward. Of course, he can do that in year 2 as a starter. But I think it's, can Julian Fleming be a 1,000-yard receiver this year? Can star tight end Tyler Warren come back and be another focus of the passing game? And then if those guys are the guys defenses are keying off on, is that going to allow other Penn State wide receivers to win one-on-one battles? Will they be able to do that? Because I'm with you. I mean, the offensive line should be great. They lost 3 OLs to the NFL, but they returned starting guards in Wormley and Nelson, and they'll be joined by Nick Dawkins at center, Drew Shelton at tackle, and then probably at the other tackle, the Wisconsin transfer, Nolan Rucci. So, it's there. The defense we think is going to be as good as anybody in the country. They were, 3rd in the country in defense last year?
Yep.
So they're probably a top 3 defense again, 3 to 5 defense again this year.
Yeah, possibly better.
Maybe even better. Maybe even better. And then, and John, Penn State has an elite Australian punter in Riley Thompson, who averaged 45.8 yards per punt last year.
Jeez.
Nearly 46 yards a punt. That is outstanding.
Love it.
I know, right? Punting is winning. Penn State has to find a kicker, though. Sander Sahaydak will compete with Tulsa transfer Chase Meyer for the kicking job. Sahaydak missed his only 2 field goal tries last season. But Meyer from Tulsa made 17 of 20 field goals last year. So one of those guys has to step up.
Yep.
Penn State will need that. They're going to have a close game, close games. At least a couple times. They'll have at least a few close games.
Oh, yeah.
Should we play the schedule game?
Let's do that.
All right. State. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Here we go. All right. Penn State has an interesting opener. They open against a rival of sorts. They go to West Virginia to take on the Mountaineers. And you'll remember West Virginia's coach was on the hot seat, Neil Brown, going into last season, but then they won 9 games. So he is on the hot seat no more.
Yeah.
He is off the hot seat.
Was not expecting that at all.
Yeah. That said, West Virginia should be back. They should be pretty solid this year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they have the straight up athletes to compete with Penn State for 4 quarters, but that could be a really interesting game for like a half or like 3 quarters.
Yeah.
I think eventually Penn State's got the horses. I think they run away, but that could be but whether or not they do, that'll be a key. And John, before we get too much into it, we gotta talk about Andy Kotelnicki. Oh my goodness, I almost forgot the offensive coordinator.
Good gosh.
It was the biggest hire of the offseason for Penn State by far. And the best offensive coordinator hire, I would say, of the whole offseason. Last year, Drew Aller at Penn State threw for 6.77 yards per attempt. Last year, Kansas, where Andy Kotelnicki was 3rd in the country with a yards per attempt of 10.04 yards. That is a huge difference.
Yeah.
And Kotelnicki is known for being able to scheme guys open, known for taking less talent and making more out of it. So maybe if Penn State doesn't have a lot of depth, if Julian Fleming is the only elite receiver on the roster, not saying he is necessarily, but if he is, Kotelnicki will probably be able to, find a way to get people open.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that that he's the answer that James Franklin has been looking for since he started at Penn State. As far as offensive coordinator goes, it's
7 in 10 years. 7 in 10 years.
It's incredible. So, like, either Kotelnicki, you're going to be there for a little while, or you might be looking for another job next year. I don't know.
He has a big buyout.
Oh, it does.
He knows. Okay. He wasn't screwing around. He knows. Like, he still gets paid a lot of money, even if he gets fired.
I'm sure, but is that going to stop James Franklin from still firing him? Because
here's my question: is James Franklin too involved in the Penn State offensive decision making? Because he's an offensive coach.
Yeah.
And he's fired all these coordinators, but you know what? And these coordinators have underperformed. And what's most of them? Not Joe Moorhead was great, right? Joe Moorhead was great.
Yeah.
But Kirk Shiraka, Mike Yursich, and these guys were extremely successful at their previous stops.
True.
So the fact that they failed so miserably at Penn State makes you wonder. It's kind of like the question we have with Iowa. Yeah. We're going to find out with Iowa. Was Kirk Ferentz the problem with the offense? Can he let go and let another guy just run it? Or is he still going to have his fingers in there screwing it up?
Yep.
And that's my question with James Franklin and Andy Kotelnicki. Can James Franklin step off, allow his wildly talented offensive coordinator to do what he does and scheme up wide open receivers?
Mm-hmm.
And, and that might make James Franklin uncomfortable. He might want to throw the ball on 3rd and short more than he's used to. He might want to, throw the ball more on 1st and 10 than he's used to. Does James Franklin allow that to happen, or does he get in the way? Because Andy Kotelnicki should not fail.
I agree.
What he's done at Kansas is remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the guy is he's a genius.
Yep.
So, and Mike Yursich was a really great offensive coordinator, and Kirk Shiraka was a perfectly solid offensive coordinator. So, like, James Franklin needs to get out of the way, is what I'm saying.
Yep. Agreed.
Okay. back to the schedule game.
Yes.
So we have West Virginia. I think we think Penn State wins that game.
Yes.
Then they get Bowling Green, who was salty last year. Bowling Green is a salty MAC team, but Penn State's going to beat Bowling Green.
Yes.
And then they have Kent State, who went 1-11 last year. So Kenny Burns, we love you, but you're not going to beat Penn State. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be. That game's going to be. I predict Penn State drops 60 plus in that game.
Yeah. Easily.
Like he's without really breaking a sweat doing it.
Yep.
Yeah. Then it gets kind of interesting. They host Illinois. Now, Penn State hasn't always played great against Illinois.
Exactly. Bielema is very familiar with their formula for sure.
Yes. And he's going to be able to run the ball. I just think, I don't know this year, John, with Penn State's defense as great as it is right now, I don't know if Bielema's going to be able to run the ball and shorten the game the way he needs to make that interesting or not.
No, I don't think so. And I don't think Altmaier is going to be able to escape with his legs against that kind of pass rush. I think that it's going to shut him down. And they're just going to be able to key on the, Illinois running backs, and that's it.
Altmaier's not bad, but he's not a guy that I trust to stretch the field.
Nope.
You know? And I just think Penn State's going to be able to creep their safeties up to the box and make things hard on Illinois.
Yep.
Then they host, and so again, their only away game has been West Virginia so far. Then they host UCLA, which, I mean, we're gonna review, or we're gonna preview UCLA later in this episode, and it's year one of a rebuild. It is what it is, John.
Yep.
Sometimes Chip Kelly stopped recruiting and he left a smoking crater in Westwood, where a football program is supposed to be. I know they went 8-5 last year, but he was not recruiting. He was signing way too few prospects and not good enough prospects. And the depth fell off a cliff at that program. So it's going to take a while, I think, at UCLA for them to get to a point where they can compete in the Big Ten at all. But especially against a team like a Penn State.
Yep. Agreed.
And then it gets really interesting. At USC, at Wisconsin, host Ohio State. There is, because remember, Penn State doesn't have to play Michigan this year. They got away with Michigan. They don't play Michigan, and they don't play Oregon. So that is their toughest stretch for sure. At USC, at Wisconsin, host Ohio State. And the good news is that after USC, they have a bye week to get ready for Wisconsin and then the Ohio State game. So that's good that it sets up like that it's broken up a little bit. At USC, I just think, man, as great as USC is, like this, I think Miller Moss is going to be running for his life at times.
Yeah, I think it's going to, USC's offense might be able to do a couple things early on. But once Penn State figures it out, it's just, they're going to just totally shut them down.
Yeah. I think I could see USC's offense having 17, 21 points in the first half, something like that.
Yep.
And like going along, and then Penn State's going to figure out which offensive lineman can't keep up with their D line, and they're going to exploit it.
Yep.
So I do think they could lose that game, but I think they probably beat USC. Then at Wisconsin, man, but with a bye week to get ready. Man, Andy Kotelnicki with a bye week. Ooh. That'll be something to see. Tom Allen too, man.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. If that game weren't off a bye, I think Wisconsin has a real chance.
Yeah. Wisconsin always plays Penn State tough.
Yes. Wisconsin always plays Penn State tough, generally. But with 2 weeks to prepare, man.
Yeah.
So we're talking undefeated Penn State potentially against either undefeated or one loss Ohio State. So we're probably talking about 2 top 5, 6-ish teams.
Yep.
And that one, my friend, on November 2nd is going to be an absolute banger, and it's in Happy Valley.
Yeah.
Not a whiteout, though.
What
I
is the
don't know
whiteout
why.
this year?
I think the whiteout is Washington, and I think the fan base is pissed about it.
That's right. That's right. You're right.
But the TV networks get what they want, and I think they want Ohio State for the big noon game.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be wild, man. I'm looking forward to that game. I think it's going to be incredible. But I think Penn State goes undefeated up until Ohio State, and
Yeah,
coming into and with the Buckeyes coming into town, that's tough for anybody. I think Penn State is built to possibly pull out a win, but Ohio State is just loaded absolutely everywhere. I don't see many, if any, flaws in that team. So
no, I mean, I don't have Ohio State losing any games this year.
Neither do I.
Yeah, so I think Penn State loses there. But at that point, there's still only one loss. Then they get Washington rebuilding.
Yep.
At Purdue, still rebuilding.
Mm-hmm.
At Minnesota, ooh. Minnesota has played Penn State really tough over the years and has beaten them in spots. In years James Franklin was really good. He's either lost to or nearly lost to Minnesota.
Yeah.
It's going to be late in the year. It'll be cold. It'll be the kind of cold that Minnesota likes to invite you into the bank and play a fist fight when it's really cold and every body blow hurts.
Yeah, true.
I think that could be a really interesting competitive game. Yeah. I think Penn State wins. I do. But I look at the two games that I'm not sure. I could see at Wisconsin or Minnesota. Those are the games other than Ohio State that I think Penn State, and at USC, I guess. Those three games at USC, at Wisconsin, and at Minnesota are the games outside of the Ohio State game where I think Penn State has a chance to lose if they lose the turnover battle, if the other team shows up, has a good game plan, if things, if they don't get the bounces, that kind of thing.
See, I would actually pick West Virginia over USC as a possible loss.
Really?
I really think Penn State is going to handle USC.
Okay.
And like I said, I think it's going to be a tale of two halves. I think it may be pretty close.
Yeah.
It's the first half. And then I think Penn State's defense is just going to totally annihilate USC's offensive line, and Miller Moss is going to be running for his life for the rest of the third and fourth quarter.
My concern with that, and I'm with you, my concern for USC is if USC can't run the ball, and again, if Woody Marks is your best running back,
yep,
I'm not convinced by that. If USC can't run the ball, then Penn State is going to be teeing off on Miller Moss. And Miller Moss isn't Caleb Williams. He can't just run around forever and get away.
Yep.
So I guess I'm with you there. I think ultimately I'm saying, but if they won the turnover battle by a bunch, if whatever, they could theoretically, I see what you're saying, that you think West Va matches up a little better with Penn State than USC does.
I do. I think West Virginia might be just a better or a tougher team on the line of scrimmage at this point in time. And it's a big rivalry.
Definitely a tougher home crowd. Definitely tougher to play in Morgantown than it is in LA.
Absolutely.
I've been there to the Coliseum. The Trojan fans don't make a lot of noise, dude. They don't. They really don't. At times, I remember when Minnesota was playing there, what was that, 2011? That thing felt like a neutral site game with the crowd. And there were way more LA fans, but they were sitting on their hands. They were just they're fanning themselves. It's hot. It's hot. It's hot. So yeah, whereas, Morgantown, they're going to be liquored up. It's a night game. They're going to be ready.
It's going to be wild. Yeah.
They're going to be
ready. It's going to be a fun one.
I think that one's going to be close for a half too. I think a half, 2 to 3 quarters, something like that.
Yeah.
And then they finish up against Maryland, which is another team that we are previewing today. So I do think that Maryland has not had any luck against Penn State at all. They've gotten crushed by Penn State pretty much every time they played. They have not been able to handle them in the trenches ever. And Maryland's the advantage that Maryland normally has is their speed, but Maryland doesn't have a speed advantage against Penn State.
No. And they still don't have an offensive line.
No, they don't have an offensive. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. We'll get to it.
But yes,
yeah.
I do think Penn State will handle that game.
Yeah.
Pretty easily.
So we've got Penn State going 11-1.
Yeah.
That if you go 11-1 in the Big Ten Conference, you should host a playoff game. If you don't
Absolutely.
are they playing for the conference title at 11-1?
They
would
could
be in the conversation for it. They could be playing for it.
That's just it. I mean, a lot of people are forgetting about Penn State and this schedule, and everyone's just automatically putting up Ohio State and Oregon, which is valid. I get it. It makes sense. As of right now, that's kind of where I have it. But there's a big argument. If Penn State is able to pull this off the way we've just been talking about it, then there's a big argument that they could be playing Ohio State again in the championship game.
Yeah, and that could be wow. Can you imagine how wild that would be?
Be crazy. Be great.
It's gonna be. I think it's gonna be a really exciting year to be a Penn State fan.
I think so too. There's a lot to look forward to.
I'm excited to cover this team.
I think I predict a bounce back. I think they're going to look better than last year. Not that, bounce back from 10 wins. But in the perception of a Nittany Lion fan, it's a bounce back year.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, the bowl game was embarrassing. There was no excuse for that. I mean, they just fully were not. You could tell even the coaches were kind of lackadaisical on the sidelines. I was like, you didn't even prepare your team for this. You were already looking at next season.
Yep.
You were already looking at hiring your new coordinators. You were already, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, Penn State picking you to go to the college football playoff. Don't let us down. But also, if Penn State, say, drops games to Wisconsin and Minnesota and goes 9-3, that will also be entertaining because that would put James Franklin. That might be enough to put James Franklin not on the hot seat, but like in a warmer seat.
Yeah.
If Penn State goes 9-3 against that schedule and misses the playoff.
It's exciting.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Anything else you want to say about Penn State before we move on?
No. I'm just looking forward to seeing this team play. I'm hoping Minnesota can pull out some of the same magic that they had last time when the Nittany Lions came to town.
2019 Pixie Dust. Do we have it? Do we have some?
Hopefully somebody's got it, right?
Yep. It's possible. I like that here's what I like about it. I like that it's the penultimate game of the year. It's going to be as cold as possible. And the colder it is, the better Minnesota's record is at home.
It's true. Yeah.
It's because even teams in the Big Ten footprint aren't always ready for how cold the Twin Cities get in late November.
Yep.
It's different. It's different. Yeah.
I just wish we were playing USC at that time. That'd be fun.
They'll never do that to USC. I bet you there's an under the table agreement when they join the conference that they don't have to go play anywhere cold in late November.
Yeah, I'm sure they've got some kind of deal like that. It's like only through the end of October, and that's it.
Yeah, that the only team they're going to play at that's cold weather is Notre Dame, and let's be real, Indiana is not as cold as most of the Big Ten footprint.
No, not even close.
Yeah. All right. Penn State Nittany Lions, you're going to be great. Moving on to the Maryland Terrapins. And our Maryland contributor is at Ole Sun Sports. At Ole Sun Sports. Great college football content. Great Maryland fan. Appreciate all your contributions to the pod. Go give them a follow for sure.
Absolutely.
Now that you've seen how your team did in the portal and how spring went, what is your expectation for this season and what is your projected record for 2024? He's predicting an 8-4 season plus or minus 1.5 wins either way. So giving himself a range of 6.5 to 9.5. So that's a pretty wide range. That's fair. Fair enough.
All right.
Rank the following position groups, how strong you think they are comparatively. Said the strong groups are tight end, wide receivers. The good veteran starters are linebacker, running back, special teams. Good, but attrition the last 2 years, DB and O-line, and then unproven QB and D-line. I would argue that the offensive line is also unproven, but we'll get to that.
Sure.
Which players are the best for which players are going to play this fall and that are unproven or proven to be questionable? Says really the whole offensive line is up in the air and QB is still a three-way race. Skill positions are well accounted for. On defense, there's a few returning pieces and guys who are in the rotation who are expecting to play bigger roles. How did the transfer portal go? Which transfer portal players will make the biggest impact this season? Said Jalen Husky is probably the biggest name in the portal addition wise. He'll start in the secondary, and the biggest loss is Corey Dyches, but he at wide receiver, but he'll be to replace. Said it was kind of a quiet period. I would also add in that it's forgotten now, but Maryland lost their superstar linebacker Jayshon Barham to Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a rough loss as well. All right. Which members of the coaching staff or best players at position? Said MJ Morris expect to win the job at QB. At running back, it's the Roman Hemby show. Wide receiver, Ty Felton is a speed guy, and Caden Prather is the physical outside guy. There's plenty of depth and talent beyond them, and that's true. Maryland has done very well recruiting and developing wide receivers. There's no question about that.
Yep.
Thinks that Preston Howard and Dylan Wade both emerge as NFL caliber tight ends. All right. That's very optimistic. I like it. And then says OL, talented guys, but inexperienced in position battles. DL, Jordan Phillips, and listed linebacker Ruben Hippolyte, who we talked about all the time last year.
Yep.
I mean, that guy makes plays.
Absolutely.
So it sucks that they lost Jayshon Barham, but having Ruben Hippolyte back is a big deal. They're pretty young otherwise at linebacker too. At DB, said Dante Trader is the senior leader back there. And on special teams, Jack Howe is expected to kick and Ryan Capriati expected to punt. Which members of coaching staff are in prove-it mode this year? Will these coaches be fired if things don't go well for their position groups? He doesn't think, says basically that everyone seems to be doing a good job and nobody seems to be on the hot seat. So that's nice for those guys not to have to worry about that this year. How do you feel about your head coach heading into 2024? He said, I just put my Mike Locksley quotes in the main chat, but he has a high floor, a to-be-determined ceiling, but is proving himself as a great program builder. Hopefully the upward trajectory continues. And I'd agree, man. I think Mike Locksley has done a good job.
I think he's solid, man. I love Mike Locksley.
Yeah, he's Uncle Mike.
Yeah, he's great.
Great. Enjoy it. You know, any guy he was willing to do the Mayo thing and get the Mayo dumped on him, and I respect that.
Well, and I respect him for how he calls out. He calls the game as what it is, and I kind of love it that he calls out officials.
Oh yeah, he's not shy.
Nope, I respect it, man. I really do. He's great. A lot of fun having the conference
for sure. All right. Besides QB, in your opinion, what position on your team can least afford injuries? He said on offense, Roman Hemby at running back would easily be the biggest loss. On defense, he would say Ruben Hippolyte, and I agree. I would agree with both of those.
Sure.
How well is your team set up for the short and long term in the new Big Ten Conference? Thinks that they're one of the bigger beneficiaries of the new conference alignment scheduling. Says the Big Ten East has been brutal. Thinks they're well positioned to be a fringe playoff contender occasionally in the next decade, but conference contender might be a stretch. What will constitute a successful season? How well are you set up for that? Said after 3 straight bowl wins, ideally a step forward would be the goal. That would constitute 9 to 10 wins. It's feasible, but I wouldn't say highly likely. Thinks the floor is 6 to 7 wins and another lowly bowl appearance. The easier schedule will help. All right, thoughts. Leah Tagovailoa ran out of eligibility and is no longer a Maryland Terrapin. They also graduated basically their entire offensive line. That's the bad news. The good news is that their front 7 should be very good on defense. So that's positive. NC State transfer MJ Morris expected to be the starter at QB. He's the best combination of runner and passer. Cam Edge and Billy Edwards are in the contest also. You know, Edwards was MVP of the Music City Bowl victory over Auburn, and he looks to reprise that short yardage role this year if MJ Morris is in fact the starter. The question, John, and this is the only question for me with Maryland, or not the only, but this is the big question is, can the offensive line block anybody? Transfers Josh Kaltenberger, Purdue, Alu Ba, Georgia, Alan Heron, D2 shorter, are likely to start onside the low returnee Kyle Long. And then, of course, they're still competing for another spot. Here's what terrified me about Maryland. I mentioned this in a previous podcast. Mike Locksley at the Maryland spring game said they were still looking for multiple offensive line starters in the portal. And then he did not find any more offensive line starters in the portal after he made that statement. So I'm worried because when in the early part of Mike Locksley's tenure, when they struggled, they got absolutely run over on the lines of scrimmage.
Yep.
Like just run through, and especially both the offensive and defensive lines. Right. And I like their skill players. I like Caden Prather. I like Ty Felton. I like Roman Hemby. You know, they both need to cut down on the drops, Prather and Felton. Hemby is good, although he had a disappointing 2023. Can he regain his 2022 form when he ran for over 1,000 yards? That's a big question mark for this team. But again, I don't believe in this offensive line. I don't. I think Maryland has good enough skill players to move the ball at times, but they're just going to go overwhelmed by competent defensive lines, I think.
I mean, I'm just totally in sync with you on this. And let's just, to anyone who may have been watching Maryland over the last couple of years and seen how well Taulia Tagovailoa was able to play, and he was incredible, amazing. But if you're really paying attention, you saw him running a lot. He didn't stay in the pocket for very long, ever.
No.
And thank God he was the athlete he was. Because it didn't matter half the time. He was still able to make plays because he's that freakishly good, on the run, doing whatever he could. I mean, he could do freaking cartwheels and still complete, a 40-yard pass. He was amazing.
Yeah, Tagovailoa is a high-level college quarterback.
He was very special. So, but he didn't have an offensive line that was blocking for him particularly well either last year. And now you lost all of that offensive line, and you're bringing in a lot of new people. And now you don't have Taulia Tagovailoa. So, I'm sorry. I'm not saying that maybe somebody maybe they can get it together and maybe that changes somehow this year, but that's not been traditionally what has happened at Maryland. I agree. I think that they're going to score points. They've got some great guys at skill positions there. I'm not sure how well Roman Hemby is going to be able to run the ball, and when Maryland plays teams like Penn State at the end of the year, or like, even looking at Rutgers or in Iowa or Oregon. I mean, you're looking at Minnesota, like even possibly Northwestern could put something together. You don't know, and that can throw a wrench. I'm not saying you're going to lose all of those games, but it's going to be incredibly tough without an offensive line blocking for you and not having someone as freakishly athletic as Taulia Tagovailoa behind there to make plays.
Yeah.
You don't, because he doesn't exist. He's gone.
No, he is gone, and he can't escape. It's kind of like with USC going from Caleb Williams to Miller Moss, or Maryland going from Leah Tagovailoa to MJ Morris is just a different stratosphere athletically.
Yep.
It's just we're not talking about the same kind of thing. So I think Maryland's going to have to – I think they're going to struggle to block. I think they're going to have to go to like a shorter, quicker passing offense this year.
That could work.
Throw swing passes to running backs and wide receivers and slant patterns and things where you can go 1-2, get the ball out.
Yep.
And I think that's what they're going to have to do because I think the Mike Locksley loves like taking shots downfield and like drawing up double moves and like doing cool stuff like that. But I think against a lot of the teams on the schedule, they're not going to be able to do those things. I think they're going to get sacked when they do.
Yeah.
So it's going to have to change the way they play. And Locksley, man, he's a great offensive coach and he's really good at scheming stuff up, but he kind of does what he does. I don't see him out there being like, I'm tailoring my whole offense to the guys I have. Yeah. I see Locksley being like, I've got a lot of cool stuff I do and fitting in the pieces to the cool stuff he does.
Yep.
So maybe I'm wrong about that. That's probably, but that's my worry with Maryland is the offense, is that offensive line, and then having a quarterback who's not Leah Tagovailoa, who might get himself killed playing behind that offensive line.
Yeah, that's my concern as well.
Yeah. That said, on defense, Maryland's front seven should be good and experienced, despite losing Jayshon Barham. They could have a new defense if the new look secondary can make plays. D-end, Fashawn Fuller played in 13 games and was all Big Ten honorable mention. Donnell Brown, Jordan Phillips, Tazy Johnson, and DJ Samuels all should contribute up front. Senior Ruben Hippolyte's fantastic. We talked about him a ton last year and earlier in this podcast. He's back with Gote at the other linebacker. And then at DB, man, Bowling Green transferred Jalen Huskies at one corner, Perry Fisher at the other corner. Glendon Miller can play nickel or safety and looks to flourish this year. So it'll be interesting to see if they keep Glendon Miller in that nickelback position to make plays, or if they move him to safety to be there over the top. I'm curious about that. And then kicker Jack Howes is back after hitting 13 of 19 field goals and 46 of 47 PATs. So you'd like to see him do a little better than that. And Notre Dame transfer Bryce McPherson takes over at punter, and he in the past has a 45.1 yard average. And why does everyone else in the Big Ten have an awesome punter except for us? How does that even happen? Everyone else, I'm like, their average yards is 44, 45, 46 yards per punt.
Didn't we had Mortel, and then it just we fell off a cliff?
Yeah, we had the holder of the year, Peter Mortel.
Wow.
For those who don't know that joke, Peter Mortel, when he was in college, made a fake award for himself and called himself the holder of the year, and it was hilarious.
See, I didn't know that, but I wasn't. Yeah, that's amazing.
No, Peter Mortel did that. So give love to Peter Mortel. If you're out there listening, good work on that. We love that.
That's pretty funny.
All right. Should we play the schedule game?
Yeah, let's walk through this.
Okay. So, first game, August 31st, they host UConn. Great opener. UConn was 3-9 last year. They struggled to get talent into that program. They have a lot of basketball talent. They struggled to get football talent into that program.
Yeah.
So that's a good starter. Then they host, and this will be a big game, I think, for both teams for bowl eligibility. They host Michigan State after that. So that's really interesting to me. Then they go at Virginia. Virginia was pretty bad last year. Tony Elliott's, nearing the hot seat territory. So, John, I mean, there's a real, and then they host Villanova. Now, Villanova went 10-3 last year, but in a lower division. So, So Maryland has a chance to start out 4-0. I could see them doing that.
And they're really good at fast starts. They're really good at that.
Yes, you're right. Traditionally, they do. Maryland does get off to fast starts in September. So 4-0 is absolutely on the table. Then they go to Indiana. You know that I'm both. I think that's an interesting game because
I agree.
Because both Maryland has a terrible offensive line. Indiana has a terrible defensive line. It is going to be the stoppable force and the movable object. And who's going to win? I don't know. But I think both teams are going to score a ton of points because they're going to both be able to pass the ball on each other and run the ball on each other. I do think a decent amount. So I don't know. I think that's a toss up. I would lean Indiana just because they're at home. But I think Maryland, so Maryland could legitimately be 5-0, and then they get Northwestern, which is also a winnable game.
Unless David Braun is somehow even more of a wizard this year than last year. But,
I mean, David Braun has to. Here's the thing. I keep thinking, I keep looking at Northwestern's roster because we're doing them in the next preview. And I keep thinking they have to be bad this year. They have to. But then I think they had to
win 2 games last year.
Yes.
I can't say that now.
No, I can't. So I just think that David Braun is going to turn water into wine somehow.
I'm terrified.
Yes.
Why does this? How does this keep happening in Evanston?
How does Northwestern keep finding coaches that can just take a little bit and make it go a long way? I don't know. I don't know, but they're they have the right ADs apparently in place.
Yep.
Then it gets really hard. USC at Minnesota, at Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, at Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying they're going to go 0-6 to end the year, but it's possible they go 0-6 to end the year.
Again, and obviously I'm not high on USC, but I think they have potential. Their defense could possibly win them that game, in my opinion. Possibly. If
Maryland
they're
or
as good
USC?
as they're projected to be, I think. Like
Maryland.
Maryland could keep them at least in that game.
Yeah. But can they score enough?
That's the question.
And can they block Bear Alexander?
True.
That's my issue with when you say, oh, and here's the thing about Bear Alexander. He only tries some of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So if you catch him on one of those days, he's not trying that hard. It can be great.
Well, and if Maryland's front seven really steps up and is everything that they're cracked up to be, again, they could cause some problems for USC. We'll see.
But the weakness in the secondary worries me a little bit with Maryland versus USC.
Okay.
So I don't know. Maryland, I'll give them a shot in that game, but man, I look at the defensive, like the line play in the next 5 games at Minnesota, at Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, at Penn State.
That's tough.
I don't like the way Maryland matches up with any of those teams.
No.
Because I just think that any team with a decent D line, and all of those teams have decent defensive lines, somewhere between decent and great.
Yep.
Defensive lines, all 5 of those teams. I just think it's going to be really, really hard.
Yep.
For Oregon or for
Maryland.
For Maryland. And man, they get their bye week before they go to Oregon, so it doesn't even help really. You want your bye week to be before a winnable game.
Mm-hmm.
They get it after the Minnesota game, so they're going to be all beat up from the first part of the season, and then they got to go to Oregon, and they're going to get more beat up.
Yeah, you have to travel across the country now and play at Autzen.
Yeah, at Oregon in front of a crazy crowd.
Oof, that's tough.
Yeah, man, that's rough.
And then fly back to play Rutgers the next week.
Yes. Yeah, fly back to play Rutgers the next week, and then go to Iowa halfway across the country.
Yeah.
And then at least Penn State's close. At least Penn State's close in geographically.
True.
But not like on the gridiron.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, man.
Maryland, man, has a crazy schedule because, like, if they can get those wins early, they could get bowl eligible.
Yeah.
And they better get those wins early because I look at those last 6 games and I just don't have a good feeling about it.
I think they got a shot against Rutgers if Ethan Kalik-Manis isn't good again.
Yeah.
I think they could potentially beat Rutgers there, but and Iowa, I guess, is a possibility if their offense is stagnant. But their defense is so
Iowa
good.
Defense, I don't think Maryland's gonna.
Yeah,
I think it's gonna be rough.
That's a long shot. I'm just trying to find something here. But
maybe
at
Minnesota. Maybe at Minnesota if you get a lead and win the turnover battle.
Yeah,
maybe
possibly.
That's what you would have to do. I think like Loxley's really good at scheming up first drives.
Mm-hmm.
So like, if Maryland could, go into Minnesota, get a 7-0 lead, force a turnover, go up 14-0 or something.
Yeah. Very possible.
That would have to be the recipe though, because otherwise, again, I think Minnesota's going to run through them on both lines of scrimmage. And as Maryland's good enough up front, I don't know if their tackle Darius Taylor good enough up front.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
It's tough, man. I mean, I don't see a guaranteed 8 wins here.
I don't see a guaranteed 6 wins here.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you're going to get to 6, you almost have to win the first. You have to be 5-1. Mm-hmm. You have to be 5-1, and then you're going to have to pull off one upset down the stretch.
Yeah.
Because the odds of starting 6-0, even against that schedule, it's hard to win 6 games in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And I just look at that trip I look at both the trip to Indiana and also the home game against Northwestern. Also, man, Sparty, I don't think Sparty's going to be very good, but like they probably have a better quarterback than Maryland does.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that's a for sure. I think Maryland probably wins that game, but I don't think it's a sure thing they win that game.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sparty's going to struggle this year too, but I also think they're going to be better coached no matter what.
Oh, way better coached.
Yeah, so I'd be, Sparty's still dangerous.
Yes.
So yeah, I think the schedule's tougher than what people think. You see Rutgers, you see Northwestern, you see everyone remembers Iowa's everyone focuses on Iowa's offense being terrible, but but how do you keep forgetting that they won 10 games, which people
10
seem to do.
games.
And I just again, I mean, this is just the point that we've made over and over again. There is no easy win in the Big Ten anymore. Like maybe unless you're freaking Ohio State, Penn State, or maybe Michigan or
Yeah,
something.
if you're a national title contender, then there are
Yeah.
easy games. But yeah, no, man, everyone's tough.
Yeah.
Everyone's really, really, really tough.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Should we move on to UCLA?
Yeah.
All right. Our UCLA source is at Bruin Source, which is a Twitter account run by multiple people, I believe, because they always say we. So I appreciate that. Bruin Source is an awesome source for all things UCLA. So please give them a follow on Twitter.
Yes.
Now that you've seen how the team did in the portal and how spring went, what is your expectation for this season? What is your projected record for 2024? Bruin Source said would say between 4 and 7 wins. There are several 50-50 games that'll need to go our way, but we have a path to a bowl. Rank the following positions and how strong you think they are comparatively: QBs, RBs, wide receivers, tight ends, offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, secondary, special teams. Which players are the best for each position group? DL, Jay Toya, linebacker, Kane Medrano, wide receiver, J. Michael Sturdivant, running back, TJ Harden, QB, Ethan Garbers, secondary, Jalen Davies, O-line, Ruben Unie, and special teams, Mateen Bagani. Which players who are going to play this fall are unproven or proven to be questionable? Is saying that Unie is coming in from Houston at left tackle, and they need him to keep Garbers upright to have the offense run smoothly. And they need to get pass rush at the defensive end spot from Akampong. I apologize. I think I just butchered that name. But then Bagani at kicker is a new face, but he should be an upgrade, they think. How did the transfer portal go? Which transfer portal players will make the biggest impact this season? Said the portal went decently, bolstered their OL and DL with some starters. Which members of the coaching staff are in prove-it mode this year? Will these coaches be fired if things don't go well for their position groups? Obviously, it's a whole new head coach with new guys, so no one's anywhere near the hot seat. How do you feel about your head coach heading into 2024? Cautiously optimistic. Says Deshaun Foster's done a lot of good already, despite his presser gaffe, but we'll see how he leads this team in actual games.
Yeah.
Besides QB in your position, what position on your team can, in your opinion, what position on this team can least afford injuries? OL and DL will need to stay healthy for any decent success. How well is your team set up for the short and long term in the new Big Ten Conference? Said they're really in full rebuild mode, from new staff to bolstering recruiting to fundraising to building up NIL, etc. What will constitute a successful season, and how well are you set up for that this year? Said if they can get to 6 games and any bowl game, they can really jumpstart this rebuild. All right, thoughts. I like that they rock out to Dr. Dre's Still Dre at practice, because in the new world of UCLA football, John, Dre stands for discipline, respect, enthusiasm.
All right.
So they're playing Dr. Dre. They're still
DRE.
Disciplined, respectful, and enthusiastic.
Excellent.
So we've got that. I thought that was, and Still Dre. I will say I remember when that song came out.
I do too. Yes.
All right. After fighting for his spot all of last season, Ethan Garbers is your number 1 QB. Dante Moore, the 5-star, transferred to Oregon. Garbers threw for 1,136 yards last year and 11 TDs to 3 picks. So he was solid in the games he played. That's the good news. The new OC is longtime NFL coach Eric Bieniemy, who runs a West Coast timing-based offense. And here's, John, where I get a little nervous. Garber said, quote, "We went from a couple word plays to 10 to 15 word long plays now." Close quote. So, John, that's something that NFL players can handle, but is that too much to put on college players? That's my fear with Bieniemy. And it's always my fear when a longtime NFL coach goes to college. can he simplify his system to the point that college kids with limited practice time can master it?
Yeah.
That's what we're going to find out. And that's my worry with UCLA in year one, that not only are they rebuilding, but now they have this really wordy, complex NFL style offensive system. And that's a lot to ask of guys when they're just learning to play together.
Yep.
And you're trying to rebuild a program and build a culture. That's a lot to ask. Running back TJ Harden's back after running for 827 yards last season. The hope is that he can be the feature back this year after splitting carries last year with Carson Steele. Carson Steele went pro. UCLA, John, plans to use a fullback more often. So that's fun and retro. Love that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And then they need to get more out of their receivers, including J. Michael Sturdivant, who was a freshman All-American at Cal in 2022. But last year he flashed at times, but ultimately had just 36 receptions on the year. They need a lot more out of him than that. And slot receiver Logan Loya, is back after leading the team with 655 yards receiving last year and 5 TDs. The offensive line had 4 returning starters in the spring, but they lost one of those guys to the transfer portal when Bruno took off for Duke. And how fast can the 2 starting transfer OLs get up to speed? They took a guard from UNLV and a tackle from Houston. Can they produce? Defense. UCLA had a decent defense last year, but their best players are gone and need to be replaced, and only 4 starters return. So expect several transfers to start. Linebacker Oluwafemi Oladejo was great last year and practiced at times at edge rusher in the spring. Will be interesting to see how he is used. UCLA had a fantastic pass rush last year, but the star DLs are all gone, including Latte, who was the first defensive player taken in last year's, or Latu, who was the first defensive player taken in last year's draft. At edge, they brought in Navy transfer Jason Busick, who was limited by injuries last season. The defensive tackles, Toya and Keanu Williams, hope to make up for the losses at DN, but what is their defensive end play going to look like? And the secondary, they stocked up with transfers. Safeties, Ramon Henderson from Notre Dame, Brian Addison, Oregon, KJ Wallace, Georgia Tech. And then they have Jalen Davies back at corner, but there's a lot of youth behind him. So I hate, John, hearing the word young and corners in the same sentence, because we saw last year when guys get hurt, when you start putting young guys in at corner and safety who aren't ready and haven't practiced in the system much, it can be a little ugly.
Yep.
Special teams, they have Cal transfer Mateen Bagani is challenging for the starting kicking job after UCLA kickers were, get this, John, just 8 of 17 on field goals last year. Woof. Chase Berry takes over at punter, but it's not known how good he is, and he sat behind a mediocre punter last year. So, John, I want to know what you think. I'm worried about the transfers, the youth, the new systems, including the NFL, complex NFL-like offensive system, and it just, all of that makes me nervous for UCLA this year. I do like Garbers at QB. I think he's decent, and they have some skill guys to get the ball to, so they should have their moments and score a little bit. But what do you think about the Bruins here?
I'm with you. I think I do like Garbers. I think that he protects the ball well. I think that he has all the potential to be a pretty solid Big Ten quarterback, and he's got enough talent to be able to do some stuff. But the problem is, like you already touched on, is that there's just a total lack of depth across the board, and that's a scary place to be. And I don't have faith with a complex offense with a lot of new faces, a lot of new recruits, transfers, coaches, everything, a total cultural rebuild after what Chip Kelly left behind. To come out and expect any more than 6 wins. I mean, I think like there is a road possibly to get to 6 wins. If all of those things click pretty well, but I'm not expecting that. I expect there to be a lot of bumps in the road for UCLA. I do think Deshaun Foster is a great coach. I think he has a lot of potential. I think the running game could be potent. I love that they're putting a fullback in the game. I hope they do that a lot. I hope they do that a lot. Like that for makes me want to watch UCLA like just for that. Like I'll be rooting for that every down. But I don't think they're there and it's not to say that they can't eventually. I just don't think it's this year, man. I really don't. I think the Bruins, I know that there's a lot of people out there that are higher on them than what I think they should be. I think they see the potential, but it's like 2-3 years down the road.
Yeah.
I don't think it's this year.
I think people look at the 8-5 records the last couple of years and think the roster is in okay shape because of that.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that Chip Kelly stopped recruiting. He
Yeah.
stopped recruiting. He Deion Sanders level stopped recruiting. And that's rough. And Deshaun Foster is also, he may be a great coach, John, but he's a first-time head coach.
Exactly. Yeah.
So he is learning too.
Yep.
And I think when you got a first-time head coach in a league like the Big Ten, and you have a full rebuild, the way UCLA has, I think that's challenging. And I do think that Deshaun Foster, I think they're going to need to be patient with him because, like you said, it could be 2 or 3 years to really get the roster up and running to a Big Ten level.
Yeah. And I think that, again, it just as a fan, look for the growth. That's what I would suggest. I think there will be some throughout the season. I think you'll see some things you like. And you just hope by the end of the season, even if you don't have a winning record, which I don't expect, that if you see the potential of that it's heading in the right direction, then you should be happy.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you should. You can feel however you want, but like I would be if I were in that situation.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, should we play the schedule game?
Let's do it.
All right, first game at Hawaii. Hawaii is a tough place to go, but they were 5-8 last year. So I do think that's a good place to start if you have to start on the road. It's a weird schedule, John. They start at Hawaii and then they have a bye week in week 2. So I guess in a way that's good because that gives them 2 weeks to get ready for Indiana. And if UCLA is going to have any chance of making a bowl, they have to beat Indiana. Yep. I mean, they have to. If you lose to the Hoosiers, that's going to be one of your more winnable games. So they have to find a way to win that, especially at home, I think.
Yep.
Then you've got at LSU. Oof. LSU is going to have a fantastic offense this year, just like they did last year. And the defense isn't great, so you could score some points potentially. But, man, LSU they're tough.
Yeah.
They're really tough. That's tough. Then Oregon. Then at Penn State.
Oof.
Then Minnesota. Then at Rutgers. Then at Nebraska. Then Iowa.
Oof. Yeah. And this is where we talk about the line of scrimmage, man. And
getting beat up.
Yeah.
And getting beat up over the course of 6 weeks of playing tough line of scrimmage teams. I mean, especially, man, the fact that they go LSU, Oregon, Penn State, and then it's like you would have wanted to have Minnesota, Rutgers, Nebraska, and Iowa first.
Yeah.
Before the best teams in the conference beat you to a pulp.
Yeah.
But now the best teams in the conference are going to beat you to a pulp, and then you have to go to play a bunch of teams that want to be in a street fight.
Yep. That's how they play.
That's how
every game.
Yeah, that's how Rutgers, Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota play. They play like it's a street fight. They want to drag you down in the muck and punch you.
Yep.
Boy, dude, that's schedule brutal. Sets up well. Then they go at Washington, then host USC, and then host Fresno State. And Fresno State, man, is no slouch to end the year. Fresno State, Jeff Tedford, I know he just had to retire for health reasons. And hey, we hope Jeff Tedford is okay. It's too bad that he had to walk away for health reasons. But that Fresno State team is a legit Mountain West title contender.
Yeah.
And they are going to be a tough team. So I don't think that's a for sure win at all. So I look through the schedule, man, and I say at Hawaii, that's a for sure win. That's it. That's my only for sure win on the schedule.
Yep. I mean, I think they're going to win more than one, but I'm not sure they're going to.
I'm not saying they're going to go 1-11.
Oh,
I'm just saying
no.
That's the only, at the beginning of the season, you want to have 3, 4, 5 games where you're like, oh, we're going to win those.
Yeah. But I see just a few toss-ups and unfortunately quite a few probably, guaranteed losses. Going
What?
on. This is
Who
tough.
in the AD decided it would be a good idea to play Fresno State and LSU in the same year? Who decided that was a good idea?
Someone who
Because
had a
it
lot of
wasn't.
faith. Because I guess they thought Chip Kelly was going to stick around and they were going to become Oregon, like like the Chip Kelly Oregon, but that did not
No
happen.
wonder
And
Chip Kelly got out. He looked at this year's schedule and was like, nope, not gonna do it.
Yeah, this is brutal, man. This is tough.
Really tough.
And like you said, like that setup at the beginning, playing Oregon and Penn State right at the beginning of the season, and then you're going through
LSU, Oregon, and Penn State.
LSU, yeah. Damn.
I mean, and then you get into a bunch of teams that are going to beat you up. And here's the other thing, man. Do you know how many, because it's the Rose Bowl, I know because I'm going to be one of them. Do you know how many Minnesota fans are going to be at UCLA? Do you know how many Iowa fans are going to be at UCLA? Yeah. Do you know how many Indiana fans are going to be at UCLA? Yeah. Like, those are going to, I'm going to generously say those are going to feel like neutral site games, but we know what the UCLA fan base is like. The fan base doesn't show up a lot of the time.
Yep.
It's a basketball school. They don't show up for football if they're not playing well. So those are going to feel like home games for the visiting teams.
Yep.
Man, to Deshaun Foster, I don't know what he did to this. It's like, congratulations, you have a Big Ten coaching job. This is your schedule in year 1. Rough.
So again, Bruins fans, be patient. Because this is not fair. No. This is awful. I feel bad for any head coach that his first year, and that's the kind of schedule they get. That's really tough. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the conference.
Yeah, welcome to the Big Ten. Indeed. Yeah. They did not get USC. Of course they gave USC the easier schedule.
Oh yeah. Makes sense.
And then UCLA has to go through the whole gauntlet their first year of the Big Ten. Just ridiculous. Oof. John, we made it through our 5th of 6 season previews. We have almost previewed all of the Big Ten teams.
One more to go. One more to go. And then college football season.
So if you are still rocking with us 93 minutes into this podcast, you are a real one. And please like the video and subscribe to our channel. We Live for Saturday. We'd really appreciate that. Yes. And if you're on an audio platform, please leave us a review.
Yes, please.
Preferably 5 stars.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then you can trash us in the comments. That's cool.
Yes, perfectly trash us in the comments.
Just leave us a 5-star. If you want to, as always, you want to find us again right here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. You can find us on Twitter at We Live for B1GSat. You can find Mike here at Alibaba26, and you can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher. You can also email us, We Live for Saturday, b1g@gmail.com.
Awesome. All right, John, that was a lot of fun.
That was great. Can't wait for
get out of here.
Let's do it.
All right, people, we will see you in the next one.